Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talent Smart EQ's LinkedIn Live series, Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We would love to hear where you are tuning in from anywhere around the world. Just go into the comment section over to the right of your screen and tell us where you're coming from. In the meantime, while everybody's getting comfortable, thought I'd ask where I know where these people are from, but I'm sure you would love to know where everybody's from. Taryn, where are you coming from?
I am coming from Charleston, South Carolina.
Charleston, nice. And what's the weather like down there?
Beautiful. It's like probably 70 degrees.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So, Howard, where are you coming from? And see if you can top that weather.
I cannot, and surprisingly, because I'm coming from San Diego, and we are dealing with rain and cooler weather. But I never tend to complain about weather in San Diego. This is an anomaly right now.
I was going to say it's a little odd for San Diego.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Where are you coming from?
I am coming from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're having a lovely day here. It's a little sunny and it's in the 40s. I see we have people from Maryland and New York, California,
Switzerland,
Cheshire, England. I love it. And Switzerland, welcome. Frankfurt, Kentucky. From Brazil, Romania. We love everybody's joining us from Ontario, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep on listening. And listen, I am so thrilled to be kicking off 2023 as we wrap up the December topic from Emotional Intelligence here about leading with emotional intelligence in 2023 and beyond. I mean, before I introduce everybody and get into this topic, because we know it's a hot topic for everybody, I want to make sure you all remember who Talent Smart is. We are the world's premier provider of emotional intelligence assessments and programming around the world. And we're excited that you are here. I am David Brzezowski. I am one of the directors of training here at Talent Smart. And as I said, based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Let me introduce my two guests for today. First of all, we have Howard Farfel. He is the CEO here at Talent Smart. Just had his 3-year anniversary not too long ago. Before joining Talent Smart, Howard was the president at the Ken Blanchard Companies, another leading company in the leadership, training, and development space. Howard brings over 20 years of executive leadership roles, including product development, marketing, and shaping company vision, values, and culture. And joining us also is Taryn McKenzie. She's the executive vice president of client solutions here at Talent Smart. Prior to joining Talent Smart, she was the executive director of strategic partnerships at Cengage Learning, where she led the national sales team. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
First things first, since this is only January the 5th, which is kind of crazy, right? How are your holidays, Taryn?
Not so great. My entire family got COVID, so we'll move along. But luckily, I feel like I finally turned the corner, so we're doing much better.
Excellent. How about you, Howard?
Well, I guess a little bit better than that. Thank you, Taryn, but not without its challenges. We actually, as a family, we had some good family time together. I have two sons in college, and they're both at University of Michigan. And so we ended up doing a spontaneous road trip to Phoenix for the Fiesta Bowl. I guess I learned a bit more about self-management and regulation, because I don't know if we were at our best. For those of you who followed, TCU beat Michigan.
Yeah,
my sons and I. Yeah, thank you. We had a little trouble dealing with our emotions, but it was a great experience, and we had a lot of fun. So anyway, for those of you out there maybe in Michigan, go blue, and congratulations to TCU. But that made up kind of the highlight of our break, I'd say.
Nice. That's a very emotionally intelligent way of handling that loss.
Well, you weren't there, so at the moment.
That's a good point. Excellent. I had great holidays, but I also came down with COVID over New Year's, wow. Taryn. But I was very mild this time. So yeah, COVID all around, but I'm all better now. So let's jump in here as everybody continues to join us. Thanks. And please, as we're going along, if you have any questions or comments about what we're talking about, feel free to drop that into the comments section. But I think that this idea of leading with emotional intelligence, I think it's especially important as we move in to 2023 and we get it off the ground, because many leaders continue to struggle with the ever-changing landscape of the workplace. I think about what we've all been through the last several years. And let's face it, as two executives of an emotional intelligence organization, I figure who better to shed some light on the topic than the two of you. So I would love to first just get your perspective on what you feel that it means to be a leader who leads with emotional intelligence. Howard, why don't we start with you?
All right. Well, thanks, David. I think that a high EQ leader is one that can balance the strategic and market and business needs of the organization with the people needs. It's got to be both, because the people needs are about inspiring. It's about empowering, motivating the employees, because the rest of the team, those are the ones who are going to execute and translate and operationalize the strategy and the vision that have been put into place, maybe by the executives, the leadership team, or the board. And without an organization that is feeling aligned and excited and empowered, execution will fail every time. So I think a high EQ leader ends up getting better execution because they have a team. And when you think about it, it's like you hear a lot about great strategy versus great execution, and great execution is going to win every time. So I think motivating, inspiring, empowering is a big challenge and a big requirement of a high EQ leader. I think they also have to set a tone and a culture that has open and transparent and empathetic communications, where team members feel really comfortable asking questions, being candid, requesting help, not fearful of asking for help or admitting mistakes. So I think those are the challenges of an emotionally intelligent leader. And I think finally, it's someone who can embrace and anticipate change, not fear it, not be paralyzed by it, and also lead that change, right? And explain the rationale for change, so that they're comfortable kind of making tough decisions, having difficult conversations, and then holding people accountable. So, I think a lot of times people feel like an emotionally intelligent leader must be somebody who's really nice and empathetic and all about the people. And I think a truly well-rounded, emotionally intelligent leader, it's a both and, right? It's about people and results. And I think that's a challenge. It's hard to do all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. I think that's a great way to look at it. Is there is empathy, but there's also accountability that can happen at that same time. And Taryn, how about you? What's it look like for you from your perspective?
Yeah, a lot of what Howard said. There's lots of buzz right now about human-centric leadership. And for me, being an emotionally intelligent leader means you are focused on those human side of leadership. And just like Howard said, it's not an and or. It's not like you can be a great leader and not have strategic direction and all those things. You can have all that, but there's lots of great leaders that can set a strategic direction with the right milestones and the action items and the metrics. But an emotionally intelligent leader is able to add in those human-centric elements, just like Howard said, of empathy and authenticity and trust. And I've just found that those are the essential ingredients for not just the leader-employee dynamic, but also that helps build the overall culture, which helps with the overall productivity of the business.
Yeah, great add to that. Yeah. So Howard, you've been serving now as CEO for a little over 3 years. And I would imagine that you kind of today have a good pulse on the organization, what makes us tick, the whole organization. And when you think about, you compare when you first came here to TalentSmart with all the leadership experience that you had, what adjustments have you made to your leadership style, or maybe even how you approach things as a leader now that EQ is a bigger part of who you are?
Yeah, great question. I feel I was very fortunate coming from the Ken Blanchard companies and organization and having Ken almost as a mentor there. So I had worked in a very people-centric organization like Taryn is talking about, and I'd been part of a leadership team for over 10 years there, working with a lot of the same people, peers, and direct reports, and you get into a natural rhythm and very comfortable, and you have trust in relationships. So the wake up call is, coming to a new organization, and I'm sure lots of you feel this way. And I certainly felt that coming to lead an organization, particularly one that is focused exclusively on EQ, and coming in and, I was the new guy, an unknown entity, and really having to build relationships and build trust from scratch. It wasn't about what credibility or what I maybe came from or what I had done there, because the saying is people they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right. So I think I really learned quickly here, especially in an EQ organization. I had to walk the talk of emotional intelligence. it was a big thing to also realize that EQ is a skill that can be developed, and is not one that I was kind of frozen in time. Like, hey, I think I'm pretty good at this. I've taken a little bit of training before. Right. So anyway, walking the talk, building trust, and not coming in with all these ideas and decisions already pre-made, like a bull in a china shop that people didn't necessarily want to hear until they understood kind of who I was, and that I understood and took the time to get to know them. So it was really, refreshing and eye-opening, not just from a culture perspective, but then to have the tools and the assessments and kind of be in my own learning laboratory and take, our emotional intelligence assessments and get the 360 feedback from previous, teammates and also the new teammates here at TalentSmart, and learn more about my own challenges around self-awareness or self-management, understand better, how I show up, what triggers me, and just kind of getting a better baseline. And it's work in progress, right? Every day, continue to learn and practice some of the EQ strategies that I've learned about since I've been here for 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, as a work in progress. I was going to ask you really about that. Do you feel like you're still that work in progress, and as you've gone on this journey the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's beautiful about some of the tools that you can learn from is they're very prescriptive in some very specific areas to work on. And like one for me was being very intentional about explaining decisions, not just making them. And I just think, again, if you think back to your first question about highly emotionally intelligent leaders, it's really thinking about those decisions, getting input from others, and then not just making them and having everybody you think just going to follow, but explaining the rationale for those decisions, encouraging questions so people feel heard and they can understand them and how it impacts them.
Yeah, I love that, Howard, because I think that's a lot of old school leadership is I'm just going to tell you what we're going to do. And we're going to do it, right. But that doesn't really.
That does not work.
It really did it in the past, and it really does it now. I mean, I think about as we talk about even the younger generation, we all, as adults, let's face it, we all just want to know. Tell me why. I mean, if I don't agree with you, I can still at least understand why we're doing things. But I think that's a great thing to talk about. Is I've had to change maybe the way that I was leading, and I think I have a couple good questions in our comments about being emotionally intelligent leader. Where is it? Natalie asked the question, would you say that reliability and consistency are also key to developing better EQ? Either one of you want to maybe chime in on that? Reliability.
And I think those are great ones, and part of that consistency we have to realize in this world where everybody is struggling to be agile and navigating change, it may not feel like there is consistency if change is the one thing that is consistent. But I think, reliability, I think that's a great word. And that's what builds trust, right? Is people can depend on you. They take you at your word. You're reliable. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. So I think those are great ads.
Yeah, I love that. And Allison made a comment earlier that kind of really led right into that about leading with authenticity, because truly, if you are that continued self, people then can actually trust you. So I love that too. Terry, let me turn over to you, because you've made some adjustments now that you've been in this role as EVP of Client Solutions, and you've had to make some tough decisions along the way too. So what have you learned so far that's led you to some of the decisions you've made, and how are you moving forward and connecting that with EQ?
Yeah, so to kind of build on what both of you were saying, making difficult decisions about the business is something that leaders should never take lightly, because even if you view it as a positive change, a lot of people struggle with change, even when it's positive. Right. So even if it's like something positive, people just kind of feel a little bit more uncertain, especially right now, because everything else feels so uncertain, right? So I think it's really important to factor in those emotions that people might be experiencing about the change, even if you as a leader kind of think of it as a positive change. And then the other thing is, yes, we all have to go through sometimes really difficult decisions, whether it's about personnel or processes, and sometimes it's just inevitable. And one thing that I've learned is that, and Howard touched on this a little bit, but just being transparent and open can go a long way in just helping everyone kind of adjust and adapt to the change. I think the biggest thing I've seen is that people don't like to feel blindsided. So as a leader, if you can help prepare them for the upcoming change. And then, and David, you touched on this, but really talking about the impacts for them personally. How is this going to impact their role, their career? People immediately internalize things and wonder, how's this going to impact me? So right. I really think it can help ease someone's anxiety. And what that does is it allows everyone to get back on track, to stay focused and get back to business and not be so, spinning due to the change.
Yeah, great. So listen, a great question came in that Susan, I think, relates exactly what you're talking about. Susan says, if you receive feedback and give reasoning, but yet still decide to go on in a direction in which all don't agree, how do you go about gaining buy-in from those who are opposed? And I think you started to talk about that, but would you mind sharing a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, getting buy-in is so crucial, not, for anything. Like I have such a solid team right now. Probably I don't want to say this in case any of my former employees are on the call, but probably one of the best teams I've ever worked with. And, I really try to come to them and say, hey, here's the challenge. Admittedly, I don't have all the answers. What are some of your thoughts? What are some feedback? What are some potential implications? And really get them thinking through the whole thing and not come at it as, hey, like you said earlier, I'm the leader. I've got all the answers. Here's how we're going to do things. But instead say, hey, here's the problem. You have expertise and skill set that you can bring to the table. What do you recommend? How would you tackle this, knowing that we've got to solve for this, this, and this?
Yeah, and I think you even said it right about just really trusting that they have a reason why they might be disagreeing. So I think that it's those listening skills. And I think we take listening skills for granted that, it's like, well, I heard what they said, but what am I doing with what I just heard? And I think Absolutely. That's the difference between an emotionally intelligent leader is there's somebody who's pausing for a moment to make sure that they've even taken that into consideration. I mean, I've seen that with both of what you've done in the past couple of years here, is that if there was pushback on anything, I've yet to see either of you say, that doesn't matter, we're moving forward. You've at least paused to dig a little deeper to understand what is it that maybe I'm missing or maybe I'm not understanding is the challenge. But I do think in the end, kind of to Susan's question, is sometimes when you've weighed it all, you've got to move forward if you believe that everything that you've weighed is the right way to go. Is that a fair statement?
100%.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'm seeing, some great other comments just around the WIFM and understanding what is in it for everybody, so that at least you've shared all the information you can share. It addresses personal concerns. It addresses information concerns, just the stages of what a change or announcement kind of people go through. And so, I think that's critical. And then one thing I've seen work in some large organizations is you recognize there's going to be a spectrum of early adopters and then people who are a little bit in wait and see mode. And how do you harness the early adopters in the organization as change agents so that you don't feel like it's all on the leader or the leadership team, but there are others who they see the WIFM, they believe in it, and they can be the biggest influencers. So I think all that and just the over communication are just key things.
Yeah, I love that whole perspective. Let me take you both back to before Talent Smart. So when you think about your leadership and past organizations, what have you actually learned since then that you wish you could go back from an emotionally intelligent guidance? Like if you took this emotional intelligence that you are now really infusing into being a leader here, that you've learned about maybe making some decisions differently or leading teams differently. Tara, let's stick with you. And anything stick out for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned about emotional intelligence is to never underestimate the power of motivation. And what I mean by this is, clients always ask us if emotional intelligence impacts productivity, right? They want to see the bottom line. They want to see the ROI on, what's this emotional intelligence training going to do for me, for my bottom line? And I say this, imagine you had two teams. This one over here is motivated, they're engaged, they're empowered, they show up every day, they're feeling really good about the work they're doing. Then we have this team over here. They're just as intelligent, just as equipped to do the job, but they're just kind of disengaged, demotivated, maybe a little bit disconnected. What team intuitively is going to perform better? Yeah. And so that's what I mean. When I talk about the human aspects of business, people sometimes think of it as such like this soft, skill that's nice to have. It's not that. It's that here we have two teams that could be absolutely identical in terms of potential, in terms of skill set, expertise, but yet they can have a very different output based on that. And
Yeah.
I truly believe that that delta is impacted by what I'm talking about with the human elements of leadership. And by the way, I mentioned this in an article I wrote a couple of months ago. But if you don't know exactly what motivates each and every person on your team, stop right now and ask them. It's different for everyone. It might be for one person, it might be public praise that they like, in the middle of a, team meeting, you say, hey, David, you did a really great job on that. It might be financial compensation.
Right.
It might just be giving them kind of the freedom to have like a passion project that they can work on and feel really good about. But whatever it is, as a leader, it's crucial for you to kind of feed them that energy so that they can reciprocate that energy back into the role.
I love that. And you are such a good student of emotional intelligence, because that is our relationship management view in a nutshell. I mean, for anybody who's on as a participant watching this, and you're familiar with our model, we look at emotional intelligence in a relationship is there's the needs. And so I think what you're tapping into there is we're here together. So we use these 3 circles, right? And the top circle is, why are we even together here? So for, let's say, Taryn and one of her client solutions vice presidents, but then each of you have needs to be successful. And if you don't know what needs need to be met, it's probably either going to take a lot longer to get there, or we're going to miss the boat because your needs or their needs aren't being met. So I love that you even say ask, because too often, and I facilitate classes all over the world for us, right? And one of the biggest things that's an aha moment for people is whenever I say to them, so have you ever asked them what they need to be successful? And I've had people say, I mean, I can't just ask them, can I? And I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
So I think that's a great way, that Taryn, you're saying, like, I've asked people, if I can't figure it out, let's cut to the chase. Tell me, what do I need to do to help you be successful?
And Serene wrote in the comments to write it down. I have one of the worst memories ever. So I will literally and I think I talked about this in another LinkedIn Live, but writing it down, like, oh, David's got a big, engagement this weekend I should ask about. And, all that stuff, just like Howard said, like, it shows that you care and that you care about the individual, not just the worker bee that's, working for you.
Yeah. And back to what Allison said earlier, being authentic. When you do that often, people then realize, oh, you really do care. Howard, where's your thought on this too?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about, broadly, like when you asked, what are some of the lessons learned? What do I wish I knew then? And so I wasn't sure how much time we have, but there's a lot of lessons learned and things that I wish I knew. But the couple that come to mind, and again, great learnings as I, kind of got more involved in understanding some of our EQ strategies. But one is just thinking about aligning my intentions with the impact that I was having. And, so intentions versus impact. And you hear people say that all the time, like, oh, assume best intentions. Well, it's hard to assume that if the impact that came your way was very, very different than what the person intended. So I think that's one thing I wish I had thought and understood better, is to really understand. I would find out, you always find out after the fact, that a certain comment that you made, maybe some constructive feedback that you gave that you thought was really helpful and was warmly received because that was my intention. Find out later the impact was, devastating, hurtful, or they misunderstood the comments. And so, hearing that enough times, I think would have saved me some time and made me more efficient and effective if I always kind of thought about that, and then maybe asked the question at the end of a review or a discussion about a project. Ask the question, so what did you hear? Mm-hmm. How did that feel? And do you have any questions or feedback for me? Something like that earlier in my career would have been really helpful. I think the phrase of being open and curious, which as you guys know is one of our values at Talent Smart. Talent Smart, and to just again, I think at certain points in my career, feeling this need to either have the best idea or be right, as opposed to being open, being curious, asking questions. And listening, I love this phrase, listening with the intention of being influenced, as opposed to listening to respond, right? We're often so ready to respond, and you already got your hand up, ready to go, and you don't even listen.
Are you kidding me when you say that, Howard?
I didn't even see you there. So this overall idea of being open and curious with new ideas, and then the last thing is, and we can all think about this together. When is the last time you heard somebody say, "I get too much positive feedback"? Just too much positive feedback, right? And it's like you never hear that from anybody. And I think I learned that while I felt like I was giving positive feedback frequently, regularly, consistently, I would find out later from peers, direct reports, even supervisors that they really weren't sure where I stood or how I felt about a certain project because I hadn't said that much in terms of a true qualitative, kind of sharing. And so, and that's really, it's alarming. You have strong performers that you feel like you're praising all the time. They know that you think they're doing a great job. And then you find out later, it's like, well, you know what? I would, really love to hear it a little bit more consistently,
Yeah, great.
How about you, David? You have worked in large organizations, small organizations. I'm curious, as you moderate this so efficiently and effectively, what have you learned, especially now you've been part of an EQ organization, you were always leading leadership development initiatives. Yeah. How has your kind of perspective shifted?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So it's been a little over 2 years, and I will tell you that the biggest thing I've learned is I think I used to take my listening skills for granted. I listen very differently now, and I always thought I was a good listener as a leader, but then what I realized was that I was hearing what I wanted to hear sometimes, as opposed to what I really needed to be deciphering. And so if I can share any kind of wisdom, especially I hear this constantly whenever I am facilitating classes as well, is that listening skills is the one thing that many people think, oh, I have this. But the reality is that sometimes they have to stop for a second and say, well, what did I hear? And what do I need to do with it? I may have said that earlier too, but that's such a key for me. I now try and pause before I speak. And we all know that I like to talk, so let's just call that up. But I have found myself really trying to take in what I've heard to make sure I understand what it is that they're saying. Because the other thing, let's face it, the last few years have challenged us is we don't always get to see people's facial expressions and body language. But when I do get that chance, that's that other part of listening, right? Is picking up on what they're not saying in words. I am always telling organizations that I work with that we do virtual programming for, that it's so important to have videos on, because I need to be able to see when somebody is telling me they're bought into something, but their face and their body is telling me that they're not. And that's something that we all as leaders can really learn from, is just to really understand what else besides the words are important for us. And the more programs that we keep doing in person, I feel like that, and we've been doing a ton now. So please keep it coming, people, because we love being in person. But it's one of those things where now, wow, have I really learned even a lot more about myself with a listening skill, being in person, to see that whole being, if you will, too. So that would be my biggest thing that I've learned over the years, that if I could go back, I would probably revisit some of my listening skills.
And David, when you say that, it makes me think of what you teach in these sessions and what we've shared from Gene and Travis's book. But taking listening and thinking about it, not just I'm an active listener or a good listener, but I think the strategy is around practice the art of listening. And to me, that just says it. It's like, this is not a simple skill. There's an art to it, and it can be practiced and learned and improved. And I think that's, a lot about what you share when you're there in the virtual or face-to-face classroom.
Yeah, and that key word of art is so true. It's like if you did an exercise with yourself and you really stopped for a moment and went back to say, did I catch it all? Yeah. There is an art to being able to truly listen completely. So I want to take you into both of your crystal balls. So 2023, it's only January the 5th, and you each have a crystal ball. So leaders always have new challenges and opportunities to deal with. I mean, we thought that, I think 2020 was going to be the same challenge for a couple of years, and it wasn't. Every year was a little bit different. So what are you preparing for this year? And where are you seeing emotional intelligence being a part of the journey of that? So Howard, I'm going to start with you. What's your Howard crystal ball telling you?
Yeah, well, that crystal ball is probably a little murkier than usual at the start of this year. Just, I think we're all dealing with a bit more uncertainty, whether it's in the the economy, the latest with COVID and hybrid work. There's just a lot of uncertainty that's kind of out and about there. Where's the direction of different companies going? World events, right? So it's probably a little bit more challenging for most organizations to do sales projections and forecasts and to know exactly where their customers are going to be and what they're going to be looking for. So I think, big picture, hard to get a real clear picture in the crystal ball, and that, I think the reality of that will continue to drive change, and the need for agility. And those are all kind of emotional intelligence type of behaviors. I think that's what organizations are going to need. So to me, it's going to be a high EQ year, and organizations who demonstrate it and really try to get it, not just among leaders, but the rest of the organization, so people are comfortable asking questions, so that there is trust, and great team collaboration. So I think it's a real opportunity for organizations to thrive, because I think there's going to be more demand for agility and for innovation and creativity, which can be very exciting. So you can look at it either as the glass is half empty and all this uncertainty, and you can be paralyzed by it, or you can say, wow, this is an opportunity to maybe be a little different. And while it feels natural to play defense and, sit back a little bit and watch things, maybe it's the time to catch the wave a little bit earlier, be thoughtful and intentional, and think about the change, but, use this opportunity to be really innovative and creative, which means people being open and curious, among other things, which I think is such a key skill from emotional intelligence.
I really love the part that you say to encourage people to ask questions. That I would imagine that for some leaders, that could be really scary. But I think if you have some emotional intelligence skills, allowing people to ask the questions, you're a little better equipped with the skill to handle that. So let me just put you on the spot. Have you gotten any of those questions that have shocked you, and you had to really kind of take that pause and try and pull out an EQ strategy to say, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but how do I respond to that?
Sorry, in terms of what kind of questions?
Just any questions, I love what you said about allowing people to ask the questions that are going to be about the unknown. And sometimes people might throw a question about what about this?
Yeah, well, sorry. So I think, one of those things is being comfortable saying you don't know. I think that is a big thing. And I think a lot of leaders feel like, hey, I've got to have all the answers. And I think Taryn mentioned that earlier too. So it's like, you don't have all the answers. We have to come up with the answers. Right. And, the shocking questions, trying to understand where is that coming from, and, and stepping into others' shoes. So when there's a real shocking type of question that seems surprising, there's probably something else going on there. So follow that up with, other questions before trying to come up with some answer that's gonna fit. So I think really thinking about, listening and understanding where people are coming from, and asking further questions, and then not being hesitant to just say, you know what, great question, I don't know, we're going to figure this out together.
Yeah. I just had a coach. I do coaching for our organization, as both of you know as well. But I had a great conversation with somebody who felt like they had to have the answer for everything in the role that they are in. It feels like they should. And we finally had a little breakthrough with the conversation that almost of what you just said is, it's okay to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. They tried that with one of their VPs, and he said that he was just shocked at how the response was, like, oh, well, I do have some thoughts on that. And there was such a collaborative effort there. And I think that that's a key thing, that's an emotionally intelligent leader, is somebody that says, let me go ahead and ask you, what do you think, right?
100%, because you're empowering your people to buy in and get a stake and get that buy-in, like we talked about earlier. So I think sometimes you're so right that leaders think that they have to have all the answers and they have to come and already have the strategy already laid out. And a lot of times, like, especially if they have good people, they can turn to them and say, all right, what do you all think? How do you feel about the direction that we're going? And how do you feel about the goals that we're trying to hit? And all of those things that empowers people. They want that.
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, really effective leaders surround themselves with other people who know how to do things that maybe you don't know how to do, right? As the leader. Sure. I wanted to just highlight this really great comment that Elamar put. She says, it is always important to listen and work as a team, to be sensitive to the words that are said, and to make people feel that you want them in the team. That helps to carry out the tasks with motivation and always give thanks. So I think, again, Elmore, that's a great comment about listening. I mean, and we look at emotional intelligence here at Talent Smart as there's individual emotional intelligence that you work on, but you also work on team emotional intelligence, which is a little different skill set. And I think that as a team, you have to be able to look at what does that whole team bring to the table that maybe individuals themselves are not bringing to the table there.
Yep.
So Taryn, what's your crystal ball telling you?
Oh, geez. Hopefully no more COVID. No, we have, this role is so interesting because we have a really unique vantage point because we get to talk to so many different clients from so many different sectors and industries. And so right now, we're definitely in this like gray zone. I always talk to my twin sister and it's like, we can deal with change, we can deal with when we're in the black or in the white, but it's like that gray zone where it feels kind of shaky and unsettled. And, that can lead people to really feeling anxious and uncomfortable. And then you add in all these elements of technology and Zoom calls and hybrid work environments. And I think people just feel like a little bit exhausted by it all, And so I think we're having workers who are, quietly quitting and kind of feeling disconnected. And then meanwhile, I think we're really seeing leaders struggling because the same tactics that they've always done aren't necessarily working. Everything's changed. It's the dynamic has shifted. And I really think that leaders will have to lean into these elements that we talked about today, the empathy and the trust and even, giving reassurance to their team to really help everyone, feel better, move in the right direction, and just kind of get things back on track. And, I think with the start of the new year right now, if you're a leader, I think this is such a perfect opportunity to not just like beat on the drum of KPIs and revenue targets and all right, guys, let's get everyone lined up and, hitting our goals and, how are we going to hit our targets for 2023, but to really just pause and get a pulse check on your people. I loved someone had to jump off, but they said, check in on your humans, check in on your humans and make sure like, how's everyone doing? Like, we just kicked off a new year and usually that's a time of, kind of optimism and hope, but how is everyone doing right now? And I think those conversations help build that foundation of emotional intelligence that can not just improve that dynamic and that relationship with that individual, but that cascades. And all of a sudden, you're building kind of a more inclusive, emotionally intelligent culture, which ultimately all helps with positive business outcomes. So I think if you can kind of see that connection, it kind of starts with you and it can cascade down, it can really make a big impact.
Yeah, I love that. Let me ask you both from the personal side. So what's EQ done for you in your personal lives that you care to share? Whichever one of you would like to start off with that.
Well, I can't remember. I've done some of these like different talks and keynotes and things. I don't know if I shared it on the last LinkedIn, but my favorite thing that clients tell us is that this didn't just impact their work world, but it impacted their relationships at home. And right now we're doing a lot of work with the police departments. So we're working with the West Virginia police departments. And it's amazing to hear these stories about, you think of these, big, tough police officers and they have adrenaline all day because they're dealing with life or death situations. And, they come home and it's like they just want to unplug. They just want to kind of zone out and be like, you know what, I'm tapped out for the day. And to realize like, no, you got to kind of tap in. You got to kind of, nurture those relationships and that communication, whether it's with your children or your significant other or whatever. But I just think that that's so important. And so I think for me personally, it's utilizing those same self-awareness skills and relationship skills with every single relationship you have, whether it's your kids or your friends or your family. It really goes a long way across the board.
Yeah, love that. How about you, Howard?
Yeah, I think it's in the increasing blur between work and home and personal life. I think it just naturally has kind of become part of who I am and how I kind of build relationships with friends and family. And I think probably most, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, just having college aged sons,
Right.
and as they kind of get to that age and becoming young men and realizing it's like, hey, you know what, I don't have to have all the answers. They're not looking for me to have all the answers. They want to be heard. They want to feel empowered. They want me to ask questions and listen to them, with the intention of being influenced and not with the intention of me responding with the right answer. And so some of these things that make so much sense, in difficult conversations in work, make not only a lot of sense at home, but have a really powerful impact. And so I think it's been really helpful to all those relationships with my wife, and certainly with my sons and daughter.
Howard, tell about your GEM concept.
Yeah, so gosh, going way back in the parenting days, and it's not my concept, but it was going to parenting classes. GEM stood for GEM. It was like genuine engaged moments, right?
Okay.
And you're right, Karen. That was really important. When you had a 3-year-old, and the visual I remember is getting down at their eye level. So you're not always towering over them and they're trying to tell you a story about what happened at preschool, but you're down on your knees, eye to eye, having a conversation with your child and listening, and the eye contact, and not on your phone, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think those genuine engaged moments carried through from not just parenting to toddlers, but really keeping that in mind, throughout their growth into teenagers and heading off to college.
That is really cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Taryn, Howard, thank you so much for your perspectives today. And listen, we've had a lot of great feedback and comments and questions in the comments. And we would like, before anybody signs off, to let you all know that we would love to offer a complimentary 15-minute consultation to anyone who's looking to potentially bring EQ to your organization. And maybe you're not sure if you want to, but you want to have the conversation. We are going to put in the comment section information for you to get a hold of us. Specific email that'll make it easier. It's for Jody Gallen at talentsmart.com. Send a message and we will hook you up with one of our excellent consultants to do that. I want to also just remind you that we do provide assessments and programming, and we have books, all of that. And that's not a sales pitch. That is just me saying that those are the tools that if you're looking to bring emotional intelligence into your life, into your organizations, we can certainly help with those solutions and have the conversation about what maybe could work for you. Please go ahead and take advantage of that if you would. We will be back, by the way, on February the 2nd for our next Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. Be sure to join us because we're going to be talking about the next hot topic, which is resilience in the workforce. And let's face it, we have a lot of things to be resilient for, but there's great ways for us to tackle resilience in the workforce when you bring emotional intelligence into that as well. Look for us again. I hope we see you then. But in the meantime, please remember that EQ is for your everyday life. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Great job, David. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.